You're not what I expected. Martin Prescott's voice carried across the train platform, silencing 27 witnesses. Eliza Brooks stood frozen, one hand gripping her travel bag, the other clutching the letter that had promised her a future. She'd crossed 1,000 miles on that promise, sold her mother's ring to afford the ticket, left Chicago with nothing but hope and 37 cents. The envelope Martin pressed into her palm felt obscene dismissal wrapped in $20 and an apology. "I've become reacquainted with someone from my past," he said, like she was a business transaction gone wrong. The station master looked away. Women whispered. And Eliza realized with brutal clarity that she'd traded one form of desperation for another. Then a quiet voice behind her cut through the humiliation. "You don't look like someone who gives up." Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the very end. Comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story has traveled. Eliza didn't open the envelope. She stood on the platform of Kettle Springs, Wyoming, with her fingers pressed white against the paper. And she didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't ask the question everyone else was thinking why. Martin Prescott was already walking away. His boots clicked against the wooden boards with the kind of certainty that said he'd never once doubted himself. Behind him, the station master cleared his throat. A woman in a blue bonnet whispered to her companion. Two men loading freight stopped mid-lift to stare. Eliza felt their eyes like brands. "Miss," the station master said quietly, "there's a boarding house 2 streets over. Mrs. Calloway might—" "I have 37 cents, Eliza said. Her voice came out steady, flat. "How long will that cover?" The man's face went soft with pity, and that was worse than Martin's coldness. "Maybe a night, if she's feeling charitable." Eliza looked down at the envelope. Her name was written across the front in Martin's careful script. She'd memorized that handwriting, had pressed his letters to her chest in the Chicago boarding room she'd shared with 3 other women, imagining what kind of man took such care with his penmanship. Apparently the kind who rejected women in public. "Ma'am, the train back east doesn't run till Thursday," the station master added. He was trying to be kind. "If you need to wire someone for funds—" "There's no one to wire." Eliza folded the envelope and tucked it into her coat pocket. "Thank you for your concern." She picked up her bag and walked off the platform. The town of Kettle Springs spread before her like a broken promise. Dust-colored buildings lined a wide main street. A saloon, a general store, a church with peeling paint. Everything looked temporary, as if the whole place might blow away in a strong wind. Just like her future. Eliza walked until she found a bench outside the post office. She sat down, arranged her skirts, and finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single $20 bill and a note. "The money should cover your return trip and a few nights' lodging. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. You seem like a decent woman, but I've recently become reacquainted with someone from my past, and it would be unfair to both of you to proceed. I wish you well. M. Prescott." Reacquainted with someone from his past. Eliza read the words 3 times. Then she laughed. It came out sharp and bitter, startling a passing dog. She'd sold everything. Her mother's ring. The cameo her grandmother had left her. The winter coat she'd needed because she'd been stupid enough to believe that Wyoming in April would be warmer than Chicago. She'd endured Thomas Greer's wandering hands in the factory where she'd worked, saved every spare penny written letters to a stranger because the alternative was staying in a city that had already taken everything from her. And he'd become reacquainted with someone. "You look like you could use a drink." Eliza's head snapped up. A woman stood in front of her, 40-something, with dark hair pulled into a practical bun and eyes that had seen their share of disappointment. She wore a simple brown dress and an expression of wry understanding. "I don't drink," Eliza said. "Neither do I. But sometimes it's nice to sit somewhere that's not a street bench." The woman held out her hand. "Mary Alvarez. I run the boarding house Martin probably mentioned." Eliza shook her hand. "Eliza Brooks, and he didn't mention anything. He was too busy dismissing me." "I saw." Mary sat down beside her without asking permission. Whole town saw, actually. Martin has a gift for public spectacle. Last year, he announced his engagement to Sarah Hartley in the middle of Sunday service. Week later, he called it off in the general store. Man has no sense of discretion. Why would he ask me to come all this way if he was going to... Eliza stopped, shook her head. Never mind, it doesn't matter. It matters, Mary said quietly. You sold things to get here. I can tell by your dress. It's good quality but altered. Hem's been let down, sleeves adjusted. You made it last as long as you could. Eliza's throat tightened. I had a winter coat. I sold it because I thought... She stopped again. I was an idiot. You were hopeful. There's a difference. Mary stood up. Come on. I'll give you a room for a week, no charge. After that, we'll figure something out. I can't accept charity. It's not charity, it's common decency. Mary's voice turned firm. And before you argue, understand that I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you. I'm doing this because Martin Prescott is a coward, and I won't let his cowardice leave a woman stranded on a street bench. Eliza looked up at her. Why do you care? Because 15 years ago I was you. Mary's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Different man. Same story. Someone gave me a chance. Now I'm giving you one. Before Eliza could respond, a man's voice cut across the street. Mary, you hear about the Barlow Ranch? Both women turned. A lean cowboy in worn leather chaps was crossing toward them, his face troubled. He tipped his hat to Eliza, then focused on Mary. What about it? Mary asked. Sold, yesterday. Some corporation out of Denver bought the whole spread. Barlow didn't even tell his crew until this morning. 12 men out of work. Mary's jaw tightened. That's the third ranch in 6 months. Fourth if you count the Hendersons. The cowboy shook his head. Whole territory's changing. Small operations can't compete with the big money coming in. Caleb holding steady. For now, but he's down 3 men since winter and he can't afford to replace them. The cowboy finally looked at Eliza properly. Sorry, ma'am. Didn't mean to interrupt. You didn't, Eliza said quietly. He tipped his hat again and walked away. Mary watched him go, her expression thoughtful. Caleb's the man you need to meet, she said finally. Why? Because he needs help and you need work, and neither of you is too proud to admit it. Mary picked up Eliza's bag. Come on, let's get you settled first. Then we'll talk about what comes next. The boarding house was neat and spare. Mary showed Eliza to a small room on the 2nd floor, pointed out the washroom at the end of the hall, and left her alone with a promise to bring up supper. Eliza sat on the narrow bed and looked at Martin's $20 bill. It would get her back to Chicago. Maybe even leave enough for a week's rent while she found another factory job. She could go back to the life she'd left, the cramped rooms, the 14-hour shifts, Thomas Greer's breath on her neck whenever the foreman wasn't looking. She could go back to surviving. The thought made her chest tight. No. She'd left Chicago because staying meant accepting that this was all she deserved. She'd answered Martin's advertisement because somewhere in those careful, measured letters, she'd heard the possibility of something different. She'd been wrong about Martin. But she didn't have to be wrong about everything. Eliza stood up and opened her bag. Inside were 2 dresses, a change of undergarments, a hairbrush, and the small Bible her mother had given her before she died. Everything she owned that mattered. Everything she was. She ran her fingers over the Bible's worn cover and made a decision. She wasn't going back. Mary brought supper an hour later, beef stew and bread, and sat down at the small table while Eliza ate. Tell me about Caleb, Eliza said between bites. Caleb Ryder. Inherited his father's ranch 5 years ago when the old man died. Builds good horses, treats his crew fair, doesn't tolerate liars or thieves. Mary paused. Lost his wife 3 years back. Fever took her in 4 days. He's been running the place alone ever since, and it's wearing him thin. Why doesn't he hire more help? Can't afford it. Not the kind he needs anyway. Caleb's particular about who works his land. He wants people who care about the work, not just the wage. Problem is, most cowboys drift. They stay a season, maybe two, then move on. Caleb needs someone steady. Eliza set down her spoon. What kind of help does he need? Honest answer. Everything. Cooking for the crew, managing supplies, keeping the house livable. His housekeeper quit last fall after his brother tried to run the place like a business instead of a home. Since then, it's been chaos. And you think I could do that? I think you could do anything you set your mind to. Mary met her eyes. But I won't lie to you. Ranch work is hard. Long hours, rough conditions. Caleb's crew aren't sophisticated men. They're good people, but they're used to a certain way of living, and change doesn't come easy. I've worked in a factory for 6 years, Eliza said quietly. I know about long hours and rough conditions. Mary smiled. Then you'll do just fine. The next morning, Mary drove Eliza out to the Ryder Ranch in a borrowed wagon. The land opened up around them, rolling hills covered in spring grass mountains, rising blue and distant in the west. It was beautiful in a way that made Eliza's chest ache. Caleb doesn't know you're coming, Mary said, as they bumped along the rutted road. I sent word yesterday that I might bring someone, but he's not expecting much. He's been disappointed before. What should I say? Truth. He'll respect that more than pretty words. The ranch appeared over a rise, a sprawling operation with a main house, a barn, several outbuildings and corrals that stretched toward the horizon. Horses moved in the nearest pasture, sleek and powerful. But as they drew closer, Eliza saw the details Mary had mentioned. The house needed paint. The porch sagged in one corner. Weeds grew thick around the well. It looked like a place that had been loved once and was slowly forgetting how. Mary pulled the wagon to a stop near the barn. A man emerged from the shadows, wiping his hands on a rag. He was tall, lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of winter sky. He looked at Mary, then at Eliza, and his expression remained carefully neutral. "Morning, Mary," he said. "Morning, Caleb. This is Eliza Brooks." Caleb nodded to her. "Ma'am?" Eliza climbed down from the wagon before Mary could help her. "Mr. Ryder." "Just Caleb." He tucked the rag into his belt. "Mary said she might bring someone. Didn't say who or why." "I need work," Eliza said. "Mary thought you might need help." "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Whatever you need done." Caleb studied her for a long moment. His gaze wasn't unkind, but it was assessing, measuring her against some internal standard she couldn't see. "You know anything about ranching?" he asked finally. "No." "Cooking?" "Some. Enough to feed a crew if you're not particular about variety." "Horses?" "I've never touched one." A faint smile crossed his face. "At least you're honest." He glanced at Mary. "She know what she's getting into." "I told her it was hard work," Mary said. She didn't flinch. "Hard work's one thing. This place?" Caleb looked around the ranch, and something flickered in his expression. Frustration, maybe? Or weariness. "We're barely holding together. Crew's down to 4 men. House is falling apart. I'm behind on everything that matters, and can't catch up on anything that doesn't." He looked back at Eliza. "I can offer 3 meals a day, a room in the house, and $30 a month. Works cooking, cleaning, managing supplies, whatever else needs doing. No set hours, no guarantees beyond 3 months. $30 a month. It was less than the factory had paid, but it came with room and board. "What do you mean by no guarantees?" Eliza asked. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I mean, I can't promise this place will still be here in 3 months. My brother wants me to sell. Neighboring ranches are getting bought out by corporations. Every season it gets harder to make it work." He met her eyes. "I won't lie to you. Taking this job might mean walking away with nothing at the end." "That's where I am now," Eliza said. "Nothing." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. "Mary told you about my wife. She mentioned it. Then you know I'm not looking for anything complicated." He said it carefully, as if worried about giving offense. If you work here, it's work. Nothing more. I won't have people making assumptions. Good, Eliza said, because I just spent 1,000 miles coming to marry a man who rejected me in front of an entire town. I'm not interested in complicated either. Caleb's smile returned stronger this time. Fair enough. He held out his hand. You want the job, it's yours. Eliza shook his hand. His grip was firm, calloused, and brief. I'll need to get my things from the boarding house, she said. I'll take you back, Mary offered. Give you time to pack proper. No need, Eliza said. Everything I own fits in one bag. Caleb glanced at Mary, who just nodded. All right then, he said. Let me show you the house. Right. The house was worse than Eliza had imagined. Dishes piled in the sink. Dust coated every surface. The stove was crusted with old grease. Laundry spilled from a basket in the corner. The whole place smelled like neglect. Caleb stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Told you it was bad. It's not bad, Eliza said. It's just been ignored. That's one way to put it. He moved into the room, gesturing vaguely. Kitchen's here. Dining room through that door. Crew eats at 6 in the morning, noon, and 7 at night. They're not picky, but they eat a lot. Supplies are in the pantry such as it is. If you need something we don't have, make a list. I go into town every Saturday. Eliza walked to the sink and looked at the mountain of dishes. How many men? 4, not counting me. Pete's the oldest, been here since my father's time. Jesse's young, good with horses, talks too much. Rafe and Tom are brothers, solid workers, keep to themselves mostly. And they've been eating what exactly? Whatever they can scrape together. Lot of beans, some salt pork. Pete tries, but he's better with cattle than cookpots. Eliza picked up a plate. It was encrusted with something that might have been eggs a week ago. Where's your room? Caleb pointed to a hallway. Down there, second door. Yours is across from it. And the crew? Bunkhouse. Separate building past the barn. Eliza set the plate down. All right, I'll need hot water, soap, and clean rags. Also, a working stove. Stove works. I'll get you the rest. Caleb hesitated. You sure about this? No, Eliza said honestly. But I'm here anyway. He nodded slowly. That's good enough. By the time the crew came in for supper, Eliza had cleared half the dishes, scrubbed the worst of the grease from the stove, and managed to produce something that resembled food. The men filed in quietly, tracking mud and surprise across the floor. Pete, the oldest, removed his hat. Ma'am. Eliza, she said. Sit down. Food's ready. They sat. 4 pairs of eyes watched her as she set bowls on the table. Beef stew made from supplies she'd found in the pantry and augmented with vegetables she'd dug out of a sad excuse for a garden. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot, and it was real. Jesse, the young one, was the first to try it. His eyes widened. This is actual food. As opposed to what you've been eating? Eliza asked. Pete's beans, Rafe muttered. His brother Tom elbowed him, but Pete just laughed. Boy's not wrong. My cooking's purely functional. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Tom looked up. You the lady from the train station? The room went quiet. Eliza met his gaze. Yes. Prescott's an idiot, Jesse said flatly. Jesse, Caleb warned. Well, he is. Everyone knows it. Jesse looked at Eliza. No offense, ma'am, but you're better off. Man changes his mind like that, he's got no spine. None taken, Eliza said. She sat down at the table with her own bowl. And you're right, I am better off. Pete studied her over his stew. You know anything about ranching? Not a thing. But you can cook. Apparently. That's more than we've had in 6 months, Pete said. You'll do fine. It was the closest thing to acceptance Eliza had heard since arriving in Wyoming. She held onto it like a rope. After supper, the men drifted out to the bunkhouse. Caleb stayed behind, helping her clear the table in silence. They like you, he said finally. They like having food. Same thing out here. He stacked the last plate. You did good today. I cleaned and cooked. That's not exactly remarkable. It is when it hasn't been done in half a year. Caleb leaned against the counter, his expression serious. I meant what I said earlier. No guarantees. But if you can hold this place together for 3 months, you'll have earned every penny I can pay you. And if I can't, then at least you tried. He pushed off the counter. Get some rest. Morning comes early. He left her alone in the kitchen. Eliza looked around at the space she'd barely begun to reclaim, at the dishes still waiting the floor that needed scrubbing, the 100 small tasks that would fill her tomorrow. This wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd boarded that train in Chicago, but it was hers. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, that felt like enough. She woke to the sound of boots on the porch and realized she'd overslept. The sky outside her window was already light. Eliza threw off the blanket and dressed in yesterday's clothes, her fingers clumsy with the buttons. The kitchen was empty when she reached it, but she could hear voices from the bunkhouse, low, irritated rumbling that said the crew was awake and waiting. She'd promised them breakfast at 6. The clock on the mantel read 6:40. Eliza lit the stove with shaking hands and started pulling things from the pantry: flour, salt, the last of the eggs. Her mind raced through possibilities while her body moved on instinct, the same instinct that had gotten her through 6 years of factory work, where being late meant losing your position. She had biscuits in the oven and bacon sizzling when Caleb walked in. "Crew's getting restless," he said, no accusation in his voice. Just fact. "I know, I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Didn't say it would." He poured himself coffee from the pot she'd started. "But out here the work starts when the sun comes up. Animals don't wait." "I understand." He took a sip, watching her flip bacon with more force than necessary. "You always cook angry." "I'm not angry." "Could have fooled me. That bacon never did anything to you." Despite everything, Eliza felt her mouth twitch. "It's not the bacon's fault. No. It's the man who rejected you, the factory you left behind, and the fact that you're trying to prove something to people who already decided you're worth keeping." Caleb set down his cup. "You don't need to be perfect, Eliza. You just need to show up." "I did show up, 40 minutes late, and you're fixing it. That's what matters." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, nobody expected you to get it right the first morning. Pete already said he'd cover if you needed more time." Eliza turned to look at him. "Why would he do that?" "Because you made him a real food last night, and because despite what you think, people out here don't keep score the way city folk do. We just remember who tries." Caleb touched the brim of his hat. "Breakfast smells good. Don't burn it trying to punish yourself." He left before she could respond. The crew filed in 20 minutes later. They ate without complaint, and when Jessie complimented the biscuits, Eliza felt something in her chest loosen just slightly. After breakfast, Pete stayed behind while the others headed to the corrals. "Need to show you the pantry proper," he said, "so you know what we've got and what we're missing." The pantry was a disaster. Half-empty sacks of flour crawling with weevils, canned goods with no labels, a wheel of cheese so old it had grown a coat. "How have you been surviving on this?" Eliza asked, carefully. Pete pulled down a tin. "This stuff's still good. The beans are solid. Salt pork keeps forever. Everything else." He shrugged. "Caleb buys what he can afford when he goes to town, but it's never enough. Used to be his wife Anna, she'd keep things organized. Had a whole system. After she died, well, we just made do." Eliza ran her fingers along the shelves. How did she organize it? Alphabetical on the top shelf. Everyday items at eye level. Heavy stuff low. She kept a ledger too, wrote down everything that came in and went out. Pete's voice went soft. "Haven't seen that ledger in 3 years. Caleb probably burned it." "Why would he do that?" "Because everything in this house reminds him of what he lost." Pete met her eyes. "That's why he needs someone like you. Someone who doesn't know what it used to be. Someone who can make it something new." The weight of that settled over Eliza like a heavy coat. "I don't know if I can do that." You already started. Last night when you sat down at that table and ate with us like you belonged, that hasn't happened since Anna died. Caleb always takes his meals alone now, but he stayed last night, helped you clean. That's not nothing. Before Eliza could process that, Jesse burst through the door. Pete, we got trouble. Both of them rushed outside. In the corral, one of the horses was down thrashing and screaming. Caleb and the other men surrounded it, trying to keep it from hurting itself. Eliza could see blood on the animal's leg, a lot of blood. Wire, Rafe shouted. Caught in the fence wire. Tore itself open trying to break free. Caleb's face was white. Someone get the rifle. No. Eliza didn't realize she'd spoken until everyone turned to look at her. Not yet. Ma'am, that horse is suffering, Pete said gently. Kindest thing. I said not yet. Eliza climbed over the fence before anyone could stop her. The horse was a young mare, eyes rolling with pain and terror. The wire had cut deep into her foreleg, and she was bleeding out onto the dirt. Eliza knelt beside the animal's head, keeping clear of the hooves. Easy, she murmured. Easy now. Eliza, get back, Caleb said. She'll kick your head in. She's scared, not mean. There's a difference. Eliza kept her voice low, steady. Someone get me clean cloth and whiskey. You can't save her, Tom said. That leg's ruined. Maybe, but I'm not putting her down until I've tried. Eliza looked up at Caleb. Please. Something flickered in his face. He nodded once sharp. Get her what she needs. Jesse ran. The horse kept thrashing, but Eliza stayed close, talking in that same quiet voice. She'd never touched a horse before yesterday, had no idea what she was doing. But she knew fear, knew pain, knew what it felt like to be trapped and bleeding and certain that nobody was coming to help. Jesse returned with supplies. Eliza soaked the cloth in whiskey and pressed it to the wound. The mare screamed and tried to stand, but Caleb threw himself across her neck, holding her down with his weight. Talk to her, Eliza said. What? Like I am. She needs to hear your voice. Caleb's jaw clenched, but he started speaking low, rough words Eliza couldn't quite hear over the horse's panic. While he talked, Eliza worked. She cleaned the wound as best she could, wrapped it tight, and tied off the bandage with strips torn from her apron. That's all I can do, she said finally. If she makes it through the night, she might have a chance. Caleb released the mare carefully. The animal struggled to her feet, favoring the injured leg but standing. Her sides heaved, but the wild terror had faded from her eyes. I'll be damned, Pete breathed. She's not saved yet, Caleb said. But he was looking at Eliza with an expression she couldn't read. We'll need to watch her. If infection sets in, then we'll deal with it. Eliza stood her dress, soaked with blood and whiskey. But she deserves the chance. That night, Eliza sat with the mare in the barn. Caleb found her there around midnight, perched on a hay bale with a lantern at her feet. You should sleep, he said. So should you. He sat down beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. The mare dozed in her stall, breathing steady. Anna used to do this, Caleb said quietly. Sit with injured animals. Said they healed better if they weren't alone. She sounds like she was kind. She was. His voice went rough. She was everything good about this place. What happened to her? Fever. Started as a cold, turned into something worse. Doctor couldn't get here fast enough because a storm had washed out the road. By the time he arrived, she was already gone. Caleb stared at the lantern flame. I keep thinking if I'd done something different, gotten her to town sooner, sent for help earlier, maybe she'd still be here. You can't know that. No, but I can wonder. He looked at her. Why'd you really come out here, Eliza, Chicago to Wyoming territory that's not just running from a bad situation, that's trying to outrun yourself? Eliza's throat tightened. My mother died 2 years ago. Lung fever from the factory air. I kept working in the same place that killed her because I didn't know what else to do. Then Thomas Greer, one of the foremen, started making it clear that if I wanted to keep my position, I'd need to be friendlier. She met Caleb's eyes. I didn't want to be friendlier, so I answered Martin's advertisement. And he turned out to be another version of the same problem. Different problem, same solution. Eliza smiled without humor. I'm very good at choosing badly. You chose to come here, Caleb said. That wasn't bad. I chose it because I had nowhere else to go. Sometimes that's the best reason. He stood brushing hay from his pants. Mare's going to be fine. You should get some rest. Caleb. Eliza waited until he turned back. Thank you for giving me the chance to try. Thank me if she lives. But his voice was gentler than his words. The mare lived. A week later, she was putting weight on the injured leg. 2 weeks after that, she was moving almost normally. Jesse named her Lucky, which made Eliza laugh despite herself. What's funny? Jesse asked. Nothing. It's a good name. Better than what Tom suggested. He wanted to call her Stubborn. Jesse stroked the mare's nose. You got a gift with animals, Miss Eliza. I got lucky. Nah, luck's what you name a horse. What you did, that's skill. He grinned at her. You gonna stick around? Actually make this place work? That's the plan. Good, because Caleb needs someone who'll fight for things instead of just letting them die. The words stayed with Eliza long after Jesse had gone back to work. By the end of the first month, she'd transformed the kitchen into something functional. The pantry was organized and stocked with supplies she'd convinced Caleb to buy on credit. The crew was eating regular meals. The house didn't smell like defeat anymore. But the ranch itself was still struggling. She saw it in the way Caleb's shoulders tensed when he looked at the books, in the conversations that stopped when she entered a room, in the fact that he'd sold 4 horses at prices that made Pete shake his head in disgust. One morning, a man rode up to the house while Eliza was beating rugs on the porch. He was well-dressed, clean-shaven, and sitting on a horse that cost more than most people made in a year. "Morning, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "Is Caleb Ryder available? He's working the north pasture. Can I give him a message?" "Just tell him Richard Whitmore came by. I'll be at the saloon in town until Thursday if he wants to talk business." "What kind of business?" Whitmore smiled. "The kind that could save this ranch. Or end it. Depends on how he feels about progress." He rode away before Eliza could ask what that meant. When she told Caleb that evening, his face went hard. What did he say exactly? That he'd be at the saloon until Thursday, something about business that could save the ranch or end it. Eliza set down the spoon she'd been using to stir stew. Who is he? Richard Whitmore. Owns half the territory, wants to own the other half. He's been buying up ranches for the past year, paying top dollar, pushing out anyone who won't sell. Caleb's knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table. He made me an offer last winter. I told him no. Why would he come back? Because he thinks I'm desperate enough now to change my mind. Caleb met her eyes. He's not wrong. The words hung in the air like smoke. How bad is it? Eliza asked quietly. Bad enough that I'm 3 months behind on the loan. Bank's been patient because my father had history with them, but that patience won't last forever. He pushed away from the table. I'll figure something out. I always do. But 3 days later, a man arrived with a letter from the bank. Eliza watched from the kitchen window as Caleb read it, his face going pale. He didn't come in for supper. Pete found him in the barn after dark, just standing there staring at nothing. Boss, they want full payment within 60 days, Caleb said, or they're foreclosing. Pete went still. How much do you need? More than I have. More than I can get. Caleb's voice was flat. Whitmore's offer is starting to look like the only option. You sell to Whitmore, this place stops being yours. You know that. I know, but at least the crew keeps their jobs. At least something survives. Pete left him there and went straight to the kitchen where Eliza was cleaning up from the meal Caleb hadn't eaten. We got a problem, Pete said. She listened as he explained. When he finished, Eliza was quiet for a long moment. How much does he need? She asked. Couple thousand at least, maybe more depending on what he owes suppliers. Pete shook his head. It's not your problem, Miss Eliza. You've done enough. But Eliza was thinking about the $20 bill Martin had given her still folded in her Bible upstairs. About the $30 she'd earned so far. About the life she was building here and what it would mean if it all disappeared. "There has to be another way," she said. "If there is, we haven't found it yet." That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the house settle around her, thinking about choices and chances, and the difference between giving up and knowing when to fold. Around 2 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hall. Caleb's door opened and closed. Then more footsteps heading outside. Eliza pulled on her robe and followed. She found him sitting on the porch steps, looking out at the dark ranch. He didn't turn when she sat down beside him. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Can't think, can't breathe, can't figure out how I'm supposed to tell the crew they're losing their home." His voice cracked. "This is my father's legacy, Anna's memory, everything I've worked for since I was 15 years old, and I'm about to lose it because I wasn't good enough to keep it running." "That's not true. Isn't it I couldn't keep Anna alive? Couldn't keep my brother from trying to gut this place for profit? Couldn't compete with the big operations moving in? What part of this suggests I was good enough?" Eliza grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "The part where you've kept this ranch alive for 3 years after losing your wife. The part where your crew stayed even when you couldn't pay them full wages. The part where you took a chance on a complete stranger because she needed help." Her voice shook. "You think you're failing, but all I see is someone who refuses to quit even when quitting would be easier. Easier doesn't keep the bank from foreclosing. No. But giving up doesn't either." She released his arm. "What would Anna tell you to do?" Caleb was quiet for so long, Eliza thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "She'd tell me to fight, to find another way, to remember that land is just dirt unless you've got people worth sharing it with. Then fight. With what I'm out of options, Eliza. Then we'll find new ones." She stood up. "Tomorrow I'm going into town. I'm going to talk to Mary to the bank to anyone who might have ideas. You're going to talk to your crew and figure out what you can sell that won't gut the operation. And we're going to find a way through this that doesn't involve Richard Whitmore." Caleb looked up at her. "Why do you care so much? You've been here a month. You could walk away tomorrow and nobody would blame you. Because this place gave me something nobody else would a chance to be more than what I was running from." Eliza's throat was tight. "I'm not losing that. Not without a fight." She went back inside before he could see the tears in her eyes. The next morning, she rode into town with Pete. Mary was sweeping the boarding house steps when they arrived. "Eliza, what's wrong? I need your help." Eliza climbed down from the wagon. "Caleb's going to lose the ranch unless we can raise money fast. What do you know about loans and banks and making things work when they shouldn't?" Mary's expression shifted. "Come inside. We need to talk." What Mary told her changed everything. Mary poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from Eliza at the small kitchen table. Her expression was serious in a way that made Eliza's stomach clench. "The bank that holds Caleb's loan," Mary said. "It's owned by Richard Whitmore." Eliza's cup froze halfway to her lips. "What?" "Whitmore bought the bank 6 months ago. Nobody knew until the papers were filed. He's been calling in loans on every small ranch in the territory, then swooping in to buy the land when they can't pay." Mary's voice was flat with anger. "He's not just a buyer, Eliza. He's a predator with a system. That's legal. Legal enough that nobody's been able to stop him. He hires good lawyers, files everything proper, makes sure there's no way to challenge him in court." Mary leaned forward. "But there might be a way around him." "How?" "The loan Caleb has it was originally with Mountain Valley Bank before Whitmore bought them out. The original terms included a clause that if the borrower could secure alternative financing, they could transfer the debt without penalty." Mary pulled a folded paper from her apron pocket. "I still have friends at the county office. Got them to pull the original loan documents." Eliza scanned the paper. The language was dense and legal, but Mary had circled a paragraph halfway down. "What does this mean exactly?" It means if Caleb can find someone else willing to take over his loan even partially, Whitmore can't force the foreclosure. He'd have to honor the transfer. Who would take on debt for a failing ranch? Someone who believes in what Caleb's building. Someone who sees value beyond the numbers. Mary met her eyes. Someone like you. The words hit Eliza like a physical blow. I have $67 to my name, Mary. I can't. You can co-sign. Bring in investors. There are people in this territory who hate what Whitmore's doing, but don't know how to fight back. Give them a way to invest in something real, something that proves you can stand against the corporations, and they'll line up. That's not how money works. It's exactly how community works. Mary's voice turned fierce. This territory was built by people helping people. Before the big money came in, we survived by lending each other tools, sharing harvests, pooling resources when times got hard. Whitmore wants us to forget that. He wants everyone isolated and desperate. But if we can show there's another way. The door banged open. Pete stood there breathing hard. Miss Eliza, we got trouble at the ranch. They made it back in 20 minutes that felt like hours. Eliza could see the smoke before they crested the last hill, thick black columns rising from somewhere near the barn. Her heart stopped. No. No. It's not the barn, Pete said tersely. It's the feed storage. They pulled up to chaos. The crew had formed a bucket line from the well, throwing water on flames that were already consuming the wooden shed where Caleb stored winter feed. Months of hay and grain going up like kindling. Caleb was in the middle of it, his face black with soot, shouting orders. When he saw Eliza, something flashed in his eyes. Relief maybe, or just exhaustion. Get back, he yelled. Whole thing's going to collapse. As if on cue, the roof caved in with a groan that sounded almost human. Sparks exploded into the air. Jesse stumbled backward, coughing. Tom kept throwing water even though it was clearly hopeless. It took another hour before the fire burned itself out. What was left was ash and charred timber and the acrid smell of destruction. The crew stood in a loose circle staring at the ruins. Nobody spoke. There wasn't anything to say that would change what they were looking at: a winter's worth of feed gone. Thousands of dollars in supplies gone. Any chance of making it through to spring gone. Caleb walked away from the group without a word. Eliza found him at the corral, gripping the fence rail so hard his knuckles were white. How did it start? She asked quietly. Don't know. Jesse says he smelled smoke around 10 this morning, but by the time he got there it was already burning. Caleb's voice was hollow. Could have been a stray spark from the forge. Could have been spontaneous combustion if the hay was too damp. Could have been set on purpose, Eliza finished. He looked at her sharply. You think Whitmore would? I think desperate men do desperate things, and I think the timing is awfully convenient. She moved closer to him. Mary told me about the bank, about the clause in your original loan. Doesn't matter now. Even if I could find alternative financing, I don't have feed to get through winter. I'd need to buy replacement supplies, and I can't afford that on top of everything else. He laughed bitterly. Whitmore doesn't need to foreclose. He just needs to wait for me to starve out. No! Eliza's voice came out harder than she intended. You don't get to quit. Not after everything we've... She stopped herself. Not after everything you've built here. I'm not quitting. I'm facing reality. Reality is what you make it. She grabbed his arm. Mary knows people who might invest. If we can show them this place is worth saving, it's not worth saving. The words exploded out of Caleb. Look around, Eliza. The feed's gone. The loan's due. The ranch is bleeding money I don't have. Anna's gone. My brother wants me to sell. And I'm standing here pretending that any of this matters when the only smart thing to do is walk away before I drag everyone down with me. Eliza slapped him. The sound cracked across the yard like a gunshot. Caleb's head snapped to the side. When he looked back at her, his eyes were wide with shock. You want to give up, Eliza said. Fine, give up. Sell to Whitmore. Let him turn this place into just another corporate operation where men are numbers and land is profit. But don't you dare pretend it's because you don't have a choice. You have a choice. You're just scared to make it. Scared. His voice was low and dangerous. You've been here 6 weeks and you think you understand. I understand that you loved your wife, and you're terrified of loving anything else because losing her broke something in you. I understand that this ranch is the last piece of her you have left, and letting it fail feels like losing her all over again. I understand that you'd rather destroy yourself than risk letting anyone else in. Eliza's eyes were burning. But I also understand that Anna wouldn't want this. She'd want you to fight. And if you can't fight for yourself, then fight for the men who stayed when you couldn't pay them. Fight for the horses you've raised. Fight for... She stopped. She'd almost said, for me, but caught herself just in time. Caleb was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. What do you want from me? I want you to stop running. I want you to stand still long enough to see what you still have instead of what you've lost. She released his arm. And I want you to let me help you save this place, even if you don't think it can be saved. Before he could respond, a horse came thundering up the drive. The rider was young, well-dressed, and bore an unmistakable resemblance to Caleb. Same jaw, same eyes, different everything else. Well, the newcomer said, swinging down from his horse. Looks like I got here just in time to watch everything burn. Caleb's face went hard as stone. Marcus. Brother. Marcus looked past him to the smoking ruins, then to Eliza. And who's this? Don't tell me you finally found yourself a replacement for Anna. Shut your mouth, Caleb said. Touchy. Must have hit close to home. Marcus grinned, but there was no humor in it. Relax. I'm not here to judge your domestic arrangements. I'm here because I heard you're about to lose this place, and I wanted to make one last offer before Whitmore picks the bones clean. I'm not selling to you either, even if I'm offering twice what Whitmore is. The number stopped everyone cold. Even Pete, who'd been standing silent near the barn, straightened up. You don't have that kind of money, Caleb said slowly. No, but I have investors who do. Chicago money looking for Western property. They're willing to pay premium for established operations with good water rights and proximity to the rail line. Marcus pulled a folded document from his jacket. I did you a favor, brother. Talk them up to a number that'll clear your debts, set you up with enough to start fresh somewhere else, and still leave the crew with severance pay. In exchange for what? The ranch, all of it. Buildings, land, livestock, water rights. They'll keep it running, might even keep some of the crew on if they're willing to work for new management. Marcus held out the document. It's a good deal, Caleb. Better than you deserve considering how you've run this place into the ground. Caleb didn't take the paper. This is our father's land. Our father's dead, has been for 5 years. And in that time you've lost money every season, driven off good workers, let the property fall apart, and generally proven you're not fit to run a ranch. Marcus's voice turned cold. I'm offering you a way out with dignity and tact. Take it. No, then you're a fool. Marcus shoved the document back in his jacket. Whitmore's going to foreclose in 60 days. When he does, you'll get nothing. My offer expires when I ride out of here. Think about that while you're deciding whether pride is worth starving for. He mounted his horse and looked down at Caleb. I'll be at the hotel in town until Saturday. After that, this deal's dead, and so is any brotherly goodwill I might have left. He rode away before anyone could respond. The silence that followed was crushing. Finally, Pete cleared his throat. Boss, maybe we should... No, Caleb said flatly. We're not discussing this. He walked away toward the barn. Pete looked at Eliza helplessly. He can't just ignore it, Pete said. He's not ignoring it. He's processing. Eliza watched Caleb disappear into the barn. Give him time. We don't have time. Marcus is right about one thing. 60 days isn't enough to turn this around. Then we'll make it enough. Eliza turned to face the crew who'd gathered in a loose knot. How much feed did we lose? Jesse wiped soot from his face. All of it, maybe 3 months' worth if we'd been rationing. And how much would it cost to replace? More than we have. Even buying cheap, we're talking hundreds of dollars. What about other ranches, anyone nearby who might sell at cost? Tom shook his head. Everyone's hurting right now. Nobody's got extra to spare, and if they did, they wouldn't sell it cheap. Eliza looked at the burned shed, her mind racing. What if we didn't replace it? Ma'am, the horses need feed. I know. But what if instead of buying feed, we found another way to get through winter cut costs somewhere else? Sell something we can afford to lose. Make the operation leaner until we can rebuild. She looked at Pete. Is that possible? Possible and smart are different things. But is it possible? Pete rubbed his jaw. Maybe. We could sell off some of the young stock horses that aren't fully trained yet. They wouldn't bring premium prices, but they'd bring something. We could reduce the herd focus on just the breeding pairs and the best workers. Cut our feed needs by half. That's selling off the future, Rafe said quietly. Those young horses are what keep this place profitable in good years. Good years aren't what we're dealing with. Pete's voice was grim. Right now, we're trying to survive bad years. If that means sacrificing future profit for present survival, then that's the trade we make. Eliza felt something settle in her chest. How many horses would we need to sell? 10, maybe 12. Bring in enough to buy minimal feed and keep the bank quiet for another month. Pete looked toward the barn where Caleb had gone. But he won't like it. Those horses are Anna's bloodline. She bred the mares, picked the stud. Selling them feels like selling pieces of her. Then we'll make sure he understands we're not selling her memory. We're honoring it by keeping her dream alive. Eliza straightened her shoulders. Call the crew together tonight after supper. We're going to make a plan. What kind of plan? The kind that saves this place. She started walking toward the barn. Even if we have to drag Caleb into saving it himself. She found him sitting in an empty stall, head in his hands. He didn't look up when she sat down beside him. Marcus is wrong, she said quietly. About all of it. Is he, though? Caleb's voice was muffled. I have lost money. I have driven off workers. I have let this place fall apart. Because you were grieving. Because you were doing it alone. Because nobody taught you how to run a ranch and mourn at the same time. Eliza waited until he looked at her. But you're not alone anymore. You have a crew that stayed when they could have left. You have neighbors who respect what you're trying to do. You have Mary pulling loan documents and me sitting in a barn trying to convince you that giving up is the only real failure here. You don't understand what you're asking me to do. I'm asking you to trust. To believe that maybe the life you're building now can be as meaningful as the life you lost. To stop punishing yourself for still being alive when Anna isn't. Her voice cracked. I'm asking you to choose this. Choose the ranch, the crew, the future. Choose... She stopped again. Choose me, she'd almost said. But that wasn't fair. Wasn't right. Wasn't something she had any right to ask. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, What did Mary tell you about the loan? Eliza explained about the transfer clause, about the possibility of bringing in investors, about building community support. Caleb listened without interrupting. And you think people would actually invest in this place? He asked when she finished. I think people would invest in you. In what you represent. In the idea that you can stand against corporations and win. She held his gaze. But we need to show them something worth investing in. We need to prove this ranch can survive. By selling Anna's horses. By making hard choices. The kind Anna would have made if she were here. Eliza's voice softened. She'd want you to survive, Caleb. Even if survival means letting go of pieces of the past. His eyes were wet. I don't know if I can. Then let me help you. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. We'll do it together. Every decision, every sacrifice, every hard choice. You're not alone in this anymore. Caleb looked down at their joined hands. Why do you care so much? You could leave tomorrow. Find work somewhere stable. Stop fighting battles that aren't yours. Because they are mine. The words came out fierce and certain. The moment I chose to stay here instead of going back to Chicago, I made them mine. This place, these people, this fight, It's all mine now, whether you wanted it to be or not." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. He turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay. We'll try your plan." That night they gathered the crew in the house. Eliza laid out the situation with brutal honesty. The loan, the feed loss. Marcus's offer, the timeline they were facing. When she finished, nobody spoke for a moment. Then Pete said, "So we sell the young stock, cut the herd, and pray we make it to spring." "That's the short version," Eliza confirmed. "What's the long version?" "The long version is, we find investors willing to take on part of Caleb's debt. We turn this ranch into a community investment, something people believe in enough to support. We prove that small operations can survive if they work together instead of competing." She looked around the table. "We stop playing by Whitmore's rules and start writing our own." Jesse leaned forward. "How do we find these investors?" "We start with people who hate what Whitmore's doing. Ranchers he's squeezed. Business owners who've watched him destroy competition. Anyone who wants to see him fail." Eliza pulled out the list she'd started writing that afternoon. "Mary gave me names, people she thinks might listen." "And if they don't?" Tom asked. "Then we go to the next name, and the next. We keep going until someone says yes, or we run out of time." Caleb, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. "This is going to take all of us. Everyone working harder than we have been. Everyone believing this can actually work." "We already believe it," Pete said simply. "Why do you think we stayed?" The words settled over the room like a benediction. Caleb's throat worked. "Then let's get started." They worked through the night making lists and plans and contingencies. By dawn, they had a strategy. It was desperate and uncertain, and based on far too many variables they couldn't control. But it was a chance. And for Eliza, sitting at that table with people who'd become family, watching Caleb's shoulders straighten as he started to hope again, a chance was everything. 3 days later, Martin Prescott walked into the kitchen while Eliza was kneading bread. She looked up, flour on her hands, and for a moment couldn't place him. Then, recognition hit like cold water. "Martin." "Eliza." He removed his hat. "I heard you were working out here. Wanted to see if it was true." "It's true." She went back to kneading, not trusting herself to look at him. "What do you want?" "To apologize for how I handled things at the station. It was cowardly and cruel, and you deserved better." "Yes, I did." She shaped the dough into a ball and set it aside to rise. "Anything else?" "I also wanted to say Sarah and I were not working out. I made a mistake choosing her over you." Eliza's hands stilled. She turned slowly to face him. "You're joking. I'm serious. I've realized you were the better choice. You're hard-working, sensible, exactly what a man needs in this territory." Martin stepped closer. "I'm willing to overlook the past month if you are. We could start fresh. Do this properly." The sheer audacity of it left her speechless. "You think I'd want you now?" "I think you came here looking for security, and I can still offer that. Better than whatever Ryder's paying you to scrub his floors." The kitchen door opened. Caleb stood there, taking in the scene, Eliza covered in flour. Martin standing too close, the tension thick enough to cut. "There's a problem here." Caleb's voice was dangerously quiet. "No problem," Martin said smoothly. "Just talking to Eliza about her future." "Her future's not your concern." "It is if she's willing to reconsider my proposal." Martin looked at Eliza. "What do you say, a real home instead of hired help?" Before Eliza could respond, Caleb crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't touch Martin, but his presence alone made the other man step back. "She said no the first time you asked," Caleb said. "When you rejected her in front of the whole town. She's saying no again now, even though you're too dense to hear it. So I'll make it simple. Get off my property, don't come back. And if I hear you've bothered Eliza again, we're going to have a conversation you won't enjoy." Martin's face flushed. "You can't." "I can. This is my land and she's under my protection. Now get out." For a moment, Martin looked like he might argue. Then he looked at Eliza's face, and whatever he saw there made him back toward the door. "You're making a mistake," he said to her. "No," Eliza said quietly. "I already made my mistake. Coming here to marry you was the mistake. Staying here after you rejected me? That was the best decision I ever made." Martin left without another word. The door slammed behind him. Eliza and Caleb stood in the kitchen, silence stretching between them. Finally, Caleb said, "You okay?" "I'm fine." She looked at him. "Thank you. For that." "Don't thank me. Any decent man would have done the same." "You're not just any decent man, though." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Caleb went very still. "Eliza, I know. I know you're not ready. I know this is complicated. I know—" She stopped, took a breath. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know." He crossed to her slowly, stopped close enough that she could feel his warmth. "What you said in the barn, about choosing. I've been thinking about it. And I think maybe I'm tired of choosing grief over everything else." His voice was rough. "I think maybe Anna would want me to be happy again, even if it feels like betraying her memory. It's not betrayal to keep living. No, but it feels like it." He lifted his hand, hesitated, then gently brushed flour from her cheek. "You make it feel like maybe I could try anyway." Eliza's breath caught. "Caleb." The door burst open again. Jesse stood there panting. "Boss riders coming fast from town. At least 6 of them, and they don't look friendly." Caleb was out the door before Eliza could move. She followed her heart hammering and found the crew already assembling in the yard. Pete had a rifle. Tom and Rafe stood flanking the porch steps. Jesse was pointing toward the dust cloud rising from the road. The riders came into view moments later. 6 men on horseback led by Richard Whitmore himself. He sat tall in the saddle, dressed in clothes that cost more than most men made in a year. Behind him rode men who looked like they knew their way around violence. Whitmore pulled his horse to a stop 20 feet from the porch. His smile was pleasant and cold. "Caleb Ryder, good to see you." "Whitmore." Caleb's voice was flat. "What do you want? Just checking on my investment. Heard you had some trouble with a fire. Wanted to make sure you were managing." Whitmore's eyes swept the ranch lingering on the burned shed. "Looks like you're not managing very well." "We're fine." "Are you—" Whitmore leaned forward in his saddle. "Because from where I'm sitting, you just lost 3 months of feed, you're behind on your loan, and you've got about 40 days before I foreclose on this whole operation. That doesn't sound fine to me. The loan's not due for 60 days. Actually, it's due whenever I say it's due. There's a clause about maintaining property value. Letting buildings burn down tends to violate that clause." Whitmore pulled a document from his coat. "I'm here to inform you that I'm accelerating the loan. Full payment due in 30 days, or I take possession." The words hit like a physical blow. Eliza saw Caleb's jaw clench, saw his hands curl into fists. "You can't do that," Pete said. "I can, and I am. It's all legal, all documented." Whitmore held out the paper. "You're welcome to have a lawyer review it. Though I suspect 30 days won't give you much time to find one who'll work against me." Caleb didn't take the document. "This is because I wouldn't sell to you. This is because you're a bad investment. I gave you every chance to do this the easy way. You chose hard." Whitmore's smile widened. "Now you get to watch while I take everything your father built and turn it into something profitable." One of Whitmore's men shifted in his saddle hand, drifting toward his gun. Tom saw it and raised his rifle slightly. The tension snapped tight. "Easy," Whitmore said to his man. Then to Caleb. "No need for violence. I'm just delivering papers. What you do with them is your business." He tossed the document onto the ground. 30 days, Ryder. Then this place is mine." He wheeled his horse around. His men followed, but the last one, a scarred man with dead eyes, looked back at Eliza and smiled in a way that made her skin crawl. They rode away in a cloud of dust and malice. Nobody moved until they were out of sight. Then Caleb picked up the document and read it, his face going pale. "It's real," he said quietly. "Legal language, proper signatures. He can do this." "Then we fight it in court," Jesse said. "With what money? By the time we got a hearing, the 30 days would be up." Caleb crumpled the paper in his fist. "He's got us. He's had us from the beginning." "No," Eliza stepped forward. "He doesn't have us until we give up, and we're not giving up. Eliza, you heard him. 30 days. Even if we found investors tomorrow, we couldn't raise enough money that fast." "Then we don't raise money. We find another way." She looked at Pete. "The original loan, the transfer clause Mary found. Does accelerating the payment void that clause?" Pete frowned. "I don't know. Would need to read the full contract." "Then let's read it. Right now. Because if that clause is still valid, Whitmore can't foreclose as long as we can show we're actively pursuing alternative financing." Eliza turned to Caleb. "We need to get back to town. Talk to Mary, talk to the county clerk, find out exactly what our options are." "And what do we do if the options are none?" "Then we make new options." Her voice was fierce. "But we don't surrender. Not to him. Not ever." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Pete, you're in charge until we get back. Jesse, ride to the Morrison Ranch. Tell them what happened. If Whitmore's accelerating my loan, he'll do it to others. They need to know." He looked at Eliza. "Get your coat. We're leaving now." The ride to town took an hour. Neither of them spoke much. Eliza could feel Caleb's anger radiating off him like heat, could see the way his hands gripped the reins too tight. When they finally reached town, he pulled the wagon up in front of the boarding house and sat there staring at nothing. "I can't do this," he said quietly. "Yes, you can. I can't ask people to invest in a losing proposition. I can't drag them down with me." He finally looked at her. "And I can't ask you to keep fighting for something that's already dead. It's not dead until you say it is." Eliza climbed down from the wagon. "And you don't get to decide what I fight for. That's my choice." She walked into the boarding house before he could argue. Mary was in the kitchen rolling out pie dough. She took one look at Eliza's face and set down her rolling pin. "What happened?" Eliza told her about Whitmore's visit, about the accelerated loan, about the 30-day deadline. Mary's expression grew grimmer with every word. "That's not legal," Mary said when Eliza finished. "The maintenance clause is standard, but accelerating the full amount based on a single fire. That's predatory lending." "Can we prove it?" "Maybe, but not in 30 days. Mary wiped her hands on her apron. "We need to move fast. I'll get the original loan documents from the county office. You start talking to the people on that list I gave you. See who's willing to help." "Mary, we're asking people to throw money at a ranch that might not exist in a month." "No. You're asking people to invest in stopping Richard Whitmore. That's different." Mary's eyes were hard. "He's been squeezing this territory for a year. People are angry. They're scared. Give them a way to fight back and they'll take it." The door opened behind them. Caleb stood there, hat in his hands. "I need to see those loan documents," he said. "All of them. Every clause, every option, every loophole." Mary smiled. "Now you're thinking straight. Come on. County office closes in an hour." They spent the rest of the day buried in paperwork. The clerk at the county office was a thin woman named Mrs. Patterson, who hated Whitmore with a passion that surprised Eliza. "That man has destroyed 3 businesses in this town," Mrs. Patterson said as she pulled files. "My nephew lost his feed store because Whitmore bought out his supplier and tripled the prices. I've been waiting for someone to stand up to him." She spread the documents across the counter. Caleb and Mary read through them while Eliza took notes. An hour and Mary made a sound of triumph. "Here, Section 12, Paragraph 4. The transfer clause is still active unless specifically voided in writing. Whitmore accelerating the payment doesn't void it. It just changes the timeline. So if we can find someone to take on the debt," Caleb started, "we stop the foreclosure. Not permanently, but long enough to restructure the loan with better terms." Mary looked up. "We need to find investors. Fast." I'll start making visits tomorrow, Eliza said. We'll make visits, Caleb corrected. Together. That night, they stayed at the boarding house. Mary gave them separate rooms, but Eliza couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Whitmore's smile, about the 30-day deadline, about the way Caleb had looked when he said he couldn't do this. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hall. Caleb's door opened and closed, more footsteps heading downstairs. She found him in the kitchen sitting at the table with a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking. "Can't sleep either," she asked. "Keep thinking about my father, about what he'd say if he could see me now." Caleb's voice was rough. He built that ranch from nothing, worked himself half to death to make it profitable, and I'm about to lose it in less than 5 years. Your father also lost your mother when you were 10, raised you and Marcus alone, had 3 bad seasons in a row that almost bankrupted him. Eliza sat down across from him. Mary told me the stories. Your father wasn't perfect. He just kept going. He didn't have Richard Whitmore trying to destroy him. No, he had drought and cattle disease and the railroad changing routes. Different obstacles, same fight. She reached across the table. You're not failing him, Caleb. You're honoring him by refusing to quit. Caleb looked at her hand, then slowly covered it with his own. When did you become the strong one? I've always been strong. I just forgot for a while. She threaded her fingers through his. We're going to save your ranch, not because it's easy or because we have all the answers, but because it's worth saving, because you're worth saving. His grip tightened. Eliza. The kitchen door slammed open. A man stood there bleeding from a cut on his head, clothes torn. Morrison, he gasped. Morrison Ranch. Whitmore's men, they burned us out. Caleb was on his feet instantly. What happened? They came after dark. Said we were behind on payments. Set fire to the barn, ran off the stock. The man swayed. Eliza grabbed a chair, guided him into it. Morrison tried to stop them. They beat him bad. His wife sent me to get help. How many men? Caleb demanded. 6. Same ones who rode to your place earlier. They're working their way through every ranch that owes Whitmore money. Mary appeared in the doorway, fully dressed despite the hour. I heard. We need the sheriff. Sheriff's in Denver for the week, the Morrison man said. Won't be back for 3 days. Then we handle it ourselves. Caleb looked at Eliza. You stay here. No? This could get violent. I don't care. She grabbed her coat. If we're fighting Whitmore, we're fighting together. You don't get to protect me from the hard parts. Something flashed in his eyes. Pride maybe, or recognition. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They gathered what men they could. Pete had come to town with them, and Jesse arrived within the hour. Mrs. Patterson's nephew brought 3 friends. By the time they rode out to the Morrison Ranch, they numbered 12. What they found made Eliza's stomach turn. The barn was a smoldering ruin. Livestock scattered across the range. Morrison himself sat on his porch, face swollen and bloody, while his wife tried to tend his wounds. They're gone, Morrison said when Caleb approached. Headed south, laughing about how easy it was. How much do you owe Whitmore? Caleb asked. $800. Had it almost paid off, but then they accelerated the loan, just like they did to you. Morrison spit blood. We're done. Can't rebuild. Can't afford to replace the stock. My wife wants to go back east, and I can't even argue with her anymore. Caleb knelt beside him. What if I told you there might be another way? I'd say you're dreaming. Maybe. But I'd rather dream than surrender. Caleb explained about the transfer clause, about the plan to find investors. Morrison listened with his one good eye. You're talking about standing against Whitmore directly, Morrison said when Caleb finished. He'll destroy you. He's already trying, but if we fight together, all of us whose loans he's accelerating, maybe we can show the territory what he really is. A bully with a bank. Nothing more. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Count me in. Got nothing left to lose anyway. They spent the rest of the night at the Morrison Ranch, helping salvage what they could. By dawn, Eliza was exhausted, but something had shifted. Morrison wasn't the only one who'd joined them. Two of Mrs. Patterson's nephew's friends had ranches of their own. Both had received accelerated loan notices from Whitmore in the past week. "He's making a move," Pete said as they rode back to town, "trying to grab up every small operation before anyone can organize against him." "Then we organize faster," Caleb said. Over the next week they moved like a storm through the territory. Eliza talked to shopkeepers and ranchers, church ladies and railroad workers. Caleb met with everyone who owed Whitmore money, explaining the transfer clause and the plan to pool resources. Mary worked the legal angles, finding obscure regulations and filing motions to delay proceedings. And slowly and possibly people started saying yes. A widow who'd lost her husband's ranch to Whitmore the year before donated $50. A feed store owner kicked in $100. 3 ranchers agreed to co-sign on a new loan structure if they could find a bank willing to challenge Whitmore's monopoly. "We're up to $800, Eliza reported one night. They were back at the ranch, the crew gathered around the kitchen table. "That's not enough to clear your debt, but it might be enough to show good faith." "We need $3,000 to clear it completely," Caleb said. "800 won't even slow Whitmore down." "No, but it shows we're serious." Mary spread papers across the table. "I found a banker in Cheyenne who's willing to listen. He hates Whitmore, thinks monopoly lending is bad for the territory. If we can show him we have community support, he might be willing to take over the loan." "That's a lot of ifs," Tom said. "It's all we've got." Caleb looked around the table. "Anyone want to walk away now? I understand. This might blow up in our faces. Whitmore might come after everyone involved." Nobody moved. "Then we keep going," Caleb said quietly. "We've got 3 weeks left. Let's make them count." The next day, Eliza was in town picking up supplies when she saw Marcus coming out of the hotel. He saw her and stopped. "Still here?" he asked. "Still here. Thought you'd have run back to Chicago by now, or taken my brother's inevitable failure as a sign to find better prospects." Marcus smiled. "Martin Prescott's still available from what I hear. Sarah left him. I'm not interested in Martin, or in leaving. No." Marcus moved closer. "Then what are you interested in? Because I can't figure out why someone like you would stay in a losing situation. Unless you're hoping my brother's going to marry you out of gratitude once this all falls apart." The words hit harder than Eliza expected. "What I want is none of your business. It is when it affects my family's legacy. That ranch belongs to the Riders, not to some mail-order bride who got rejected and latched on to the next available man." Eliza's hand moved before she thought about it. The slap echoed down the street. Marcus's head snapped to the side. "I'm not a mail-order bride anymore," Eliza said coldly. "I'm a woman who chose to build something instead of running away. And whatever happens with that ranch, I'll have earned my place there, which is more than you can say." She walked away before he could respond. Her hand stung, but her heart was racing with something that felt dangerously close to joy. That night, Caleb found her in the barn, brushing down Lucky. The mare had healed completely, moving with only the slightest limp. "Heard you hit my brother," Caleb said. Eliza's hand stilled. "He said some things he shouldn't have." "I'm sure he did. Marcus has a gift for finding the exact words that hurt most." Caleb leaned against the stall door. "What did he say?" "That I'm only staying because I'm hoping you'll marry me out of gratitude." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Caleb said, "Is that why you're staying?" Eliza turned to face him. "No. I'm staying because this place feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been. Because the work matters and the people matter, and for the first time in my life, I'm building something instead of just surviving." She met his eyes. "And yes, because of you. Because you see me as more than what I was or what I've lost. Because when you look at me, I feel like maybe I'm worth choosing." Caleb crossed the space between them in 2 steps. He cupped her face in his hands, calloused and gentle. "You are worth choosing," he said roughly. "You've always been worth choosing. Martin was a fool, and I'm—" He stopped. Started again. I'm trying very hard not to fall in love with you because I don't know if I have the right to ask you to stay when everything might collapse. Eliza's breath caught. You're not asking me to stay. I'm choosing it, even if we lose the ranch, even if Whitmore wins and we end up with nothing. Even then, because we'd still have each other, and that's not nothing. He kissed her then, soft and careful like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. Eliza's eyes burned with tears she didn't try to hide. When they finally pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. If we somehow survive this. When we survive this, Eliza corrected. When we survive this, he agreed, smiling, despite everything. I'm going to ask you properly, the way I should have done from the beginning. Ask me what? To stay. Not as hired help or a business arrangement, but as my partner. In everything. His voice dropped. As my wife, if you'll have me. Eliza's throat was too tight to speak. She nodded instead and felt him smile against her skin. The moment shattered when Jesse's voice cut through the barn. Bosstown rider coming fast. They ran outside. A young man on a lathered horse pulled up in the yard. Message from the bank in Cheyenne, he gasped. You're meeting with the banker. He can see you tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Said if you're serious about challenging Whitmore, now's your chance. Caleb looked at Eliza. That's our shot. Only one we're going to get. Then we take it. She turned to the house. I'll pack our things. We leave in an hour. Miss Eliza, the writer said. There's more. Whitmore knows about the meeting. He's already on his way to Cheyenne. Word is, he's bringing lawyers and enough money to make sure that banker changes his mind. The crew fell silent. Finally, Pete said, So we beat him there. We can't, Caleb said. He's got a 6-hour head start. We'll never catch up. Then we don't catch up. We go around. Pete pulled out a worn map. There's an old miner's trail through the mountains. Cuts 20 miles off the distance, but it's rough. Dangerous at night. How dangerous? Eliza asked. Dangerous enough that Whitmore won't take it. He'll stick to the main road because it's safe and comfortable. Pete looked at Caleb. But if we risk it, we could beat him there by 2 hours. Caleb studied the map. We'd need to leave right now. Ride through the night. No stops, no rest. We've done harder things, Tom said quietly. Caleb looked around at his crew. At Mary, who'd appeared from the house. At Eliza, who'd stepped up beside him like she belonged there. All right, he said. We ride. Everyone who's coming, get ready. We leave in 15 minutes. They rode out as the sun was setting. 6 of them, Caleb, Eliza, Pete, Jesse, Tom, and Rafe. Mary stayed behind to watch the ranch and keep gathering support. The trail Pete had chosen was barely a trail at all. It wound through narrow passes and along cliff edges where one wrong step would send horse and rider tumbling into darkness. Eliza's hands ached from gripping the reins. Her legs burned from staying balanced on the saddle. But she didn't complain, didn't slow down, just kept riding. Around midnight they stopped to rest the horses. Caleb found Eliza sitting on a rock massaging her calves. You doing okay? He asked. Define okay. He smiled. You're doing better than I did my first time on this trail. I fell off twice. The night's not over yet. No, but we're making good time. If the horses hold, we'll reach Cheyenne by dawn. He sat down beside her. Thank you for this, for all of it. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. We've won each other. That counts? Eliza leaned her head against his shoulder. For just a moment, she let herself feel the weight of everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate hope that maybe somehow this would work. Then Jesse called out that it was time to move, and they were riding again. They reached Cheyenne just as the sun was breaking over the mountains. The town was still mostly asleep, but the bank was already open. A sign on the door read, Private Appointment. Caleb and Eliza walked in together. The banker, a tall man named Thornton, looked up from his desk and smiled. Mr. Ryder, Miss Brooks, I've been expecting you. He gestured to chairs. Please, sit. We have much to discuss before Richard Whitmore arrives. Thornton spread documents across his desk with methodical precision. I've reviewed your situation, Mr. Ryder. The accelerated loan, the transfer clause, Whitmore's pattern of predatory lending across the territory. It's an impressive mess. Can you help us or not? Caleb asked. That depends on what you're willing to do. Thornton leaned back in his chair. Whitmore owns the bank holding your debt. That gives him legal authority to accelerate payment. But it also means any transfer of that debt requires his approval, unless we can prove the original loan terms were fraudulent. Eliza's chest tightened. Were they fraudulent? Not exactly, but they were predatory. Your father took that loan during a drought year, Mr. Ryder. The interest rate was triple the standard. Whitmore's predecessor knew your father was desperate and took advantage. Thornton pulled another document forward. I can't prove fraud, but I can prove exploitation, and in this territory that matters. How does that help us? Caleb asked. It means I have grounds to challenge the acceleration in court. Buy you time. But time isn't money, and you still need to clear the debt. Thornton looked at Eliza. Miss Brooks, Mrs. Alvarez, sent me a ledger of community contributions. $800 raised in less than 2 weeks. That's remarkable. It's not enough, Eliza said. No, but it proves something more valuable than money. It proves people believe in what you're building. Thornton opened a folder. I have 11 ranchers who've agreed to co-sign a restructured loan if I can break Whitmore's monopoly. That's leverage. If I can get Whitmore to agree to sell me your debt at a reasonable rate, those co-signers become collateral for a new loan with better terms. Whitmore will never agree to that, Caleb said. He will, if refusing costs him more than agreeing. Thornton's smile was sharp. I've been gathering evidence on Whitmore's lending practices for 6 months. I have documentation on 14 cases of predatory acceleration, 8 cases of property seizure under questionable circumstances, and 3 cases where he set fires to hasten foreclosure. Eliza went cold. You can prove he burned our feed shed. Not yet, but I can prove he did it to the Hendersons last year. Their son saw Whitmore's men setting the fire and was too scared to testify. Until now. Thornton met her eyes. Your fight gave him courage. He came forward 3 days ago with a signed statement. The door slammed open. Richard Whitmore stood there with 2 lawyers flanking him. His face was red with fury. Thornton, what the hell do you think you're doing? Having a private meeting. You're early. Thornton didn't stand. And you're interrupting. This meeting is over. Whitmore jabbed a finger at Caleb. You're wasting your time, Ryder. I own your debt. I own half this territory. And no 2-bit banker from Cheyenne is going to change that. Actually, Mr. Whitmore, I already have. Thornton slid a paper across the desk. That's a court order freezing all loan accelerations in your portfolio pending investigation into predatory lending practices. Signed by Judge Morrison this morning. Whitmore's face went white. Morrison's son owes me money. Not anymore. The community fund Miss Brooks organized paid off his debt yesterday, which means Judge Morrison can't be accused of bias when he rules against you. Thornton stood. You're done, Whitmore. You can fight this in court and lose everything when the evidence comes out. Or you can sell me Ryder's debt at face value and walk away with your reputation mostly intact. You're bluffing. Am I? Thornton opened another folder. Henderson fire. Witness testimony. Documentation linking your men to 3 other suspicious fires. Banking record showing you purchased Mountain Valley Bank specifically to manipulate lending terms. Testimonies from 47 ranchers, business owners, and residents detailing your practices. He pushed the folder forward. Take a look. Your lawyers certainly will. One of Whitmore's lawyers picked up the folder. His expression darkened as he read. He leaned close to Whitmore and whispered something Eliza couldn't hear. Whitmore's jaw clenched. How much? Face value of the original loan. $3,200. I'll take over the debt, restructure it with reasonable terms, and you walk away. Thornton's voice was cold. Or we go to court and I bury you. This is extortion. No. This is justice finally catching up. Thornton sat back down. You have until noon to decide. After that, I file everything with the territorial court and let the newspapers have it. I'm sure they'll be very interested in how the territory's biggest banker made his fortune. Whitmore looked at Caleb, then at Eliza. Something ugly moved behind his eyes. You think you've won, but you haven't. You've just made an enemy who has a very long memory. I'll take my chances, Caleb said quietly. Whitmore stormed out, his lawyers scrambling to follow. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Silence filled the office. Then Eliza said, Is it really over? Not yet. He might fight, but I don't think he will. Thornton gathered his papers. The evidence is solid. If this goes to court, he loses everything. His reputation, his banking license, possibly his freedom. Selling the debt is the smart play. And if he doesn't make the smart play, Caleb asked, then we go to war, and we win. Thornton extended his hand. Either way, your ranch is safe. Caleb shook his hand, but Eliza saw the tension in his shoulders. We still need to raise $3,000. You have $800 in community contributions. The co-signers cover another $1,000 in collateral. I'm willing to front the remaining $1,300 as a personal investment. Thornton smiled. I believe in what you're building, Mr. Ryder, and I think betting against Richard Whitmore's greed is a safe investment. They left the bank in a daze. Pete, Jesse, Tom, and Rafe were waiting outside with the horses. Well, Pete asked, we might have just won, Caleb said slowly. Or we might have just started a war. Won't know until noon. They found a small restaurant and ordered breakfast. None of them could eat. Eliza kept checking the clock. 9:30, 10, 10:30. The minutes crawled. At 11:45, a messenger arrived at their table. Mr. Thornton requests your presence at the bank immediately. They ran. Burst through the bank doors to find Thornton at his desk, papers spread before him. He looked up and smiled. Whitmore signed. The debt is mine. You're clear. The words didn't register at first. Then Caleb's knees buckled. Pete caught him grinning. Jesse let out a whoop that made the bank clerks jump. Tom and Rafe clapped each other on the back. Eliza just stood there shaking. We did it. We actually did it. You did it, Thornton corrected. The community fund, the co-signers, the pressure campaign. That was all you. He handed Caleb a new loan document. New terms. 4% interest instead of 12. 10-year repayment instead of 5. Monthly payments you can actually afford. And the transfer clause stays active, so if you ever need to restructure again, you can. Caleb read the document with hands that trembled. Why are you doing this? Because men like Whitmore have been taking advantage of men like your father for too long. Because this territory needs people willing to stand up and fight. Thornton's expression softened. And because Mary Alvarez is a friend of mine. She asked me to help, and I never could say no to her. They rode back to Kettle Springs in daylight this time. The crew was laughing, celebrating, making plans. But Eliza was quiet. Caleb noticed. You okay? He asked. I'm terrified, she admitted. We won. The ranch is safe. Everything we fought for is real, and I keep waiting for it to disappear. It's not going to disappear. How do you know? Because we built it together, and that makes it real. He reached over and took her hand. We're going to make it, Eliza, all of it. When they reached the ranch, Mary was waiting on the porch with the biggest smile Eliza had ever seen. I heard, she said, pulling Eliza into a fierce hug. Thornton sent a wire. You did it. You saved this place. We saved it, Eliza corrected. You, me, Caleb, everyone who contributed. This was never just us. No, but you started it. You refused to quit when quitting was easier. Mary pulled back, hands on Eliza's shoulders. You came here as a rejected mail-order bride with nothing. Look what you've become. That night the crew threw a celebration. Morrison came with his wife, his face still bruised, but his eyes bright. Mrs. Patterson brought pie. Neighbors Eliza barely knew showed up with food and congratulations and stories about standing up to Whitmore. Caleb stood on the porch and raised his glass. To everyone who believed when believing was hard. To everyone who fought when fighting seemed hopeless. To community and stubbornness and refusing to let the big men win. He looked at Eliza. And to second chances. May we all be brave enough to take them. The cheers were deafening. Eliza felt tears on her cheeks and didn't bother hiding them. The party lasted until midnight. When everyone finally left, Eliza helped clean up while Caleb checked the horses one last time. She was washing dishes when he came back in, standing in the doorway watching her. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking about the first morning you were here, how you overslept and panicked and made biscuits like your life depended on it. My life did depend on it. No. Your life depended on you deciding it was worth fighting for." He crossed the kitchen. "I need to tell you something." Eliza's heart stuttered. "Okay. When Anna died, I thought I died with her. Not physically, but everything that mattered. I kept the ranch running because I didn't know what else to do, but I wasn't living. I was just existing." His voice was rough. "Then you showed up. Angry and scared and refusing to give up even when you had every reason to. You made me remember what it feels like to want something, to hope for something." "Caleb, let me finish." He took her hands. "I know this started as a business arrangement. I know you came here out of desperation, not choice. But somewhere along the way, it became real. You became real. And I need you to know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude or convenience or any of the things Marcus said." "What do you feel?" "I love you." The words came out clear and certain. "I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you fight for things even when they seem impossible. I love that you see me as more than what I've lost. I love waking up knowing you're here and going to sleep knowing you'll still be here tomorrow." He dropped to one knee. "Eliza Brooks, will you marry me? Not because you need security or I need help, but because we choose each other. Because we built something real together. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it." Eliza's vision blurred. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He stood and kissed her, and she tasted salt from tears she wasn't sure were his or hers. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "Mine," he whispered. "You're mine." The word wrapped around Eliza's heart. Not possession, not control, but recognition, belonging. The knowledge that she'd found a place where she fit, where she was wanted, where she was chosen. "Yours," she whispered back, "and you're mine." They married a month later in the small church in Kettle Springs. Mary stood up for Eliza. Pete stood up for Caleb. The whole town came, and even Marcus showed up looking uncomfortable, but present. Morrison gave Eliza away since her father was long dead. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, Martin Prescott stood up in the back row. The church went silent. Eliza's heart stopped. "I object," Martin said. Then he smiled. "To not having said this sooner. I was a fool to let her go. Caleb Ryder is a lucky man, and I hope he knows it." He sat down. The tension broke. Someone laughed. The preacher cleared his throat and continued. When Caleb kissed her as man and wife, the cheers shook the rafters. The months that followed were hard work, but good work. They restructured the ranch operation, cutting costs and increasing efficiency. The community fund became a standing investment pool that helped 3 other ranchers fight off Whitmore's attempts at expansion. Thornton opened a branch bank in Kettle Springs, offering fair terms to small operations. Whitmore himself disappeared. Rumors said he'd moved to California. Others said he was planning a comeback. Eliza didn't care. He was gone, and that was enough. The ranch prospered. Not overnight, not miraculously, but steadily. Caleb taught Eliza about horses and land management. She taught him about organization and efficiency. Together, they built something better than either could have managed alone. A year after they married, Eliza found out she was pregnant. Caleb cried when she told him the first time she'd seen him cry since Anna's name had come up. "I'm scared," he admitted. "What if I can't protect you? What if something happens and I lose you like I lost her?" "You won't lose me. I'm too stubborn to leave." Eliza took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to be fine. All of us." Their daughter was born in the spring, healthy and loud and perfect. They named her Anna, and if the ghost of Caleb's first wife felt any sadness at being replaced, Eliza never sensed it. Instead, she felt only gratitude that Anna had loved Caleb enough to make him the man he was, that she'd built something beautiful he could carry forward, that her memory blessed their new beginning instead of haunting it. 5 years after Eliza stepped off that train and into rejection, she stood on the porch of the ranch house watching her daughter play in the yard, while Caleb worked with a new horse in the corral. The house had been painted, the feed shed rebuilt. The crew had grown to 8 men, all good workers who stayed because they wanted to, not because they had nowhere else to go. Mary walked up the path carrying a basket of fresh bread. She'd become family in all the ways that mattered. Grandmother to Anna, sister to Eliza, trusted friend to Caleb. "You look peaceful," Mary said. "I am peaceful." Eliza smiled. "For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. No regrets about Martin. About the life you might have had if he hadn't rejected you. None. He did me a favor. If he'd married me, I would have spent my life being grateful to be chosen. Here I get to wake up every day knowing I chose this. I chose Caleb. I chose this ranch. I chose this life." Eliza looked at her daughter, at her husband, at the land stretching toward the mountains. "That makes all the difference." That evening, after Anna was asleep and the crew had retired to the bunkhouse, Eliza and Caleb sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I've been thinking," Caleb said, "about expanding the operation. Morrison wants to sell his ranch now that his kids are grown. Asked if we'd be interested." "Are we?" "Only if you want to. This is your ranch as much as mine now. We make decisions together." Eliza thought about it. About the girl who'd arrived here with nothing. About the woman she'd become. About the community they'd built and the future they were creating. "Let's do it," she said. "Let's keep building." Caleb smiled and pulled her close. She rested her head on his shoulder and felt the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "Mine," he murmured into her hair. "Yours," she whispered back. "Always yours, and you're mine." The word had changed meaning since that first time he'd said it. It wasn't about ownership anymore. It was about choice, about two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate losses and built something neither could have created alone. It was about belonging, not because circumstances forced them together, but because they'd chosen to stay, even when leaving was easier. Eliza Brooks had come to Wyoming Territory as a mail-order bride, rejected before she could even begin. She'd arrived with nothing but desperation and a stubborn refusal to give up. She'd been thrown away like something unwanted, dismissed in front of an entire town, left standing on a platform with 37 cents and no future. But she hadn't gone back. She hadn't accepted that rejection defined her worth. Instead, she'd chosen to build something new. She'd chosen to fight for a failing ranch and a grieving man and a community that needed someone willing to stand up to power. She'd chosen love over safety risk, over certainty, partnership over desperation. And in choosing, she'd become something more than a rejected bride, or hired help, or even a wife. She'd become a woman who knew her own value, who'd built her own home, who'd written her own story, instead of accepting the one others tried to write for her. She came as a mail-order bride, rejected and unwanted. She stayed as the woman who saved a ranch, built a community, and chose a love that chose her back with equal measure. She arrived with nothing and created everything that mattered. And every day, for the rest of her life, she woke up knowing she belonged exactly where she was, not because someone else decided she was worth keeping, but because she'd decided she was worth fighting for.